Good evening, Shiken. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us this evening.
Okay, thank you, Jane. So we've got face-to-face transmission, and we're ending the book after, it's over a year, isn't it, I think, that we spent on the book. I think that was time well spent. Reb is one of my dearest teachers, and his spirit of the love of our shared being and his devotion to the practice has really meant a lot to me in my life as a Buddhist student. And so I wanted to go back and read a couple other parts of the book to kind of tie it up a little bit for what it's meant to me and what I think the spirit of Reb's teaching is really offering us. So, the face-to-face transmission, he's talking about our original face, our infinite face, which is often in Zen talked about as our original face before our parents were born. In other words, that which transcends space and time. And the intimacy of the finite face and the original face. It can be a little confusing if you're stuck on the idea of a face, because it's really beyond the idea of a human face. But the intimacy of the two and how they interpenetrate each other is the real spirit of what he's talking about here. And we don't need to seek that intimacy because, as Reb says, great compassion of the Buddha is that intimacy. So we need to receive it rather than to seek it, open to it rather than to try to control it or attain it. I wanted to read something another teacher I study in another group, Thich Nhat Hanh, who probably one of the greatest Zen masters of the modern era. He says something related to, the relationship between our true self or our Buddha nature and our finite self, our personal self. And he uses the metaphor of the ocean and the waves and the water. So he says, when you look at the surface of the ocean, you can see waves coming up and going down. You can describe these waves in terms of high or low, big or small, more vigorous or less vigorous, more beautiful or less beautiful. You can describe a wave in terms of beginning and end, birth and death. That can be compared to the historical dimension. In the historical dimension, we are concerned with birth and death, more powerful, less powerful, more beautiful, less beautiful, beginning and end, and so on. Looking deeply, we can also see that the waves are at the same time water. A wave may like to seek its own true nature. The wave might suffer from fear, from complexes. A wave may say, I am not as big as the other waves. I am oppressed. I'm not as beautiful as the other waves. I have been born and I have to die. The wave may suffer from these things, these ideas, but if the wave bends down and touches her true nature, she will realize she is water. Then her fear and complexes will disappear. Water is free from birth and death of a wave. Water is free from high and low, more beautiful and less beautiful. You can talk in terms of more beautiful and less beautiful, high or low, only in terms of waves. As far as water is concerned, all these concepts are invalid. Our true nature is the nature of no birth and no death. We don't have to go anywhere in order to touch our true nature. The wave does not have to look for the water because she is water. We don't have to look for God. We don't have to look for our ultimate dimension or nirvana because we are nirvana, we are God. You are what you are looking for. You are already what you want to become. You can say to the wave, my dearest wave, you are water. You don't have to go and seek water. Your nature is the nature of non-discrimination, of no birth, of no death, of no being, and of no non-being. So, no wave is any wetter than any other wave. So you could also say that no people are any more or less enlightened than we are, because we're all of the same essence. And, just like the waves are embraced and held by the ocean, we're embraced and held by our true nature. It can't be removed from us, just like water, the nature of water can't be removed from the wave. And let's see, Reb says on page 117 here, he says, when I wholeheartedly live my finite face, the finite face becomes the infinite face. When the wave dissolves, it becomes the ocean, right? In wholeheartedly receiving and giving in wholeheartedly receiving and giving, background becomes foreground and foreground becomes background. This is the ever-present face of perfect wisdom. So, for me, it means a lot to, cultivate the spirit of devotion and surrender to this power that we can't comprehend, and to explore the nature of that by which we know our experience as a human being. And our, meditation practice, it helps us in life practice, it helps us to fuel, that exploration with the spirit of the paramitas. So I think Reb has done a very thorough and helping us to look deeply into our being, in order to discover the nature of our true being, our true self. That Thich Nhat Hanh also says the compassion of the Buddha is boundless. And Reb quotes the Lotus Sutra that eyes of compassion observing beings bestow an ocean of blessing beyond measure. So there's an unconditionally accepting nature to our Buddha nature. It's unstained by our experience. It's also ever present. So, we open to that possibility because there's no conceptual certainty there. But intuitively, when we have great teachers that can kind of embody this intimacy, Reb puts a very great emphasis on the intimacy of all things and how we don't do anything by ourselves, but are always doing everything together with all beings. So, and this is practicing with the spirit of the paramitas. I wanted to go back on the bottom of page 96. He quotes chapter 2 of the Lotus Sutra. He says, only Buddha together with Buddha realizes the ultimate reality of all things. The seated concentration and wisdom of Buddha is only Buddha together with Buddha. This meditation is what our Zen ancestor called face-to-face transmission. How can we open to the revelation of the ultimate truth of all things? It is by opening to the truth of our intimate relationship with all beings. This face-to-face transmission of Buddha together with Buddha is possible when bodhisattvas develop the capacity for deep intimacy. So, I might have mentioned before that when I watched a video on YouTube of Reb sometime this summer, he actually wanted to change the 4 vows, or would like to change the 4 vows, the vow part to I vow to be intimate, rather than I vow to transform, delusions or embody the wisdom or whatever. That's what the intimacy means to him, and it can be confusing because intimate with something that's not perceivable or describable. But we can feel it deeply when we really commit to the practice. And Zen practice helps us do that because we learn to stay present. Don't grasp, don't turn away. And this in itself, I think, is offering our experience in the spirit of devotion, in the spirit of surrender, and in the spirit of recognizing the love of our shared being. So Reb says, as bodhisattvas, we want to be in the world in a way that offers our practice as a gift to the whole world and all beings. Our whole life is a gift from our true nature. When you think about it, there's maybe billions of chemical reactions going on inside our body that we're not even aware of or have any control over. And I was reading some neuroscientists recently who said that our thoughts, scientifically, it's kind of obvious that our thoughts are produced alongside of some of these thoughts. So there's something going on that our thoughts spontaneously appear. We don't prepare our thoughts for what type of thought or what the content of thought or when a particular thought is going to arise in our awareness. They just happen spontaneously. That's our actual experience. So we can ask, do we really choose our thoughts? That's something. Can you find the chooser? We talk in Zen about how you can't find the entity that is a separate self. Well, try to find the entity that is the chooser of our thoughts. That's a deeper mystery even, or as deep a mystery. So as Reb says, there's no basis for grasping phenomena. And ultimately we can only try to grasp because, as the Buddha says, if there are no separate things, it's all one. So nothing exists by itself. And Thich Nhat Hanh says this in many ways, that we're made of the sunshine, that, we're recycled stardust, and we're made of the food we take in. And so it's all just a continuation of our life, So there are no things to really grasp, and the very means by which we try to grasp and identify things are always fleeting and changing. Our sense organs, our ability to see, hear, feel, think, that they're all fleeting and changing. All these chemical reactions are going on there. So there is no entity, there's no fixed self that we are. So in that spirit of devotion and surrender, the San Francisco Zen Center, their newsletter is called The Wind Bell. And so Reb closes the book with the appropriate response of a wind bell. So I'll read the poem here. The whole body, a mouth hanging in emptiness, not caring which way the wind blows, east, west, north, or south. All day long it sings Prajnaparamita for all beings. Ting tong, ting tong. So I always think of the wind bell, as expressing the deepest intimacy between our human expression, of the universal activity that we share with all beings. And we don't really surrender. We don't really surrender the separate self, but we can cultivate the spirit of giving it away and allow Buddha to surrender our separate self. That intimacy, that realization is what Reb says is what saves beings from suffering. So that's what I got tonight. Let's have some discussion, I hope. I'm interested to see if the Thich Nhat Hanh reading helps with if you're feeling confused or it's kind of not quite clear what all this face stuff is about. That maybe the Thich Nhat Hanh has a way. His teaching is sort of thought of as Mother Zen as opposed to Japanese Zen, which is more like Father Zen. So he's more the Divine Mother type.
Thank you for your talk. I wanted to ask what was the source of the Thich Nhat Hanh quote because I wanted to reread it in context.
Yeah, he wrote a book, a little paperback book, back in 2002. It's called No Death, No Fear. And that part of that I read is on page 21 of the 21 and 22 of that little paperback book, No Death, No Fear. Yeah.
Thank you, Shikan, Roger. Thank you very much. I guess the feeling that I had as I read this chapter over a couple of times, I felt the same confusion that I felt for the first 5 years I belonged to the Zendo, when people were talking about things and just the whole discussion, the teachings and everything. It was like, I don't get this. I don't get this. And I would have to say, quite honestly, even now, hearing this, there's that part of me that doesn't get it, but yet there is the part of me that gets it. And it's a part of me that and I can't really articulate, but I just know it is true. And I think that that's what happens as we are consistent in our practice, that eventually we realize we have the confidence and the trust in the practice that whatever crazy stuff arises in our life, we have the ability to meet it with some measure of equanimity and wisdom. And I think that is the fruit of the practice that's so precious. When you brought Roshi Anderson to the Zendo some years ago, that was right after I had been ordained, and Mitch said, well, Jishin should be his Jisha, and I had no clue, of course, what a Jisha was and everything, but he was the jolliest, he is the jolliest, one of the jolliest, happiest, most intimate, settled human beings that I have ever been around. And I'm very grateful that he has shared his wisdom with us through this book, and grateful for people like you that have known him and brought that wisdom to us. But just as a word to people in the Zendo that may be feeling as confused as I did for many years, don't worry, it will come.
Thank you, Shikan. Sometimes it's like I don't understand. I understand parts of it, and then I don't understand other parts, and then the reality also I know is that we just keep returning to the practice, and we keep practicing, and then eventually some things will become clear. But I do appreciate the reminders with intimacy and relationship and on the mat, off the mat, with Sangha, to just keep returning to the practice. And that's kind of what we just need to do, right? We need to practice and just keep practicing. And things will become clear, and maybe some things won't, and that's okay too. Thank you.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. I'm blanking on your name, but yeah. Reb really has done a wonderful job, and I really appreciate what you said and what Jane said also, of teaching us how we really need to be compassionate with ourselves. I mean, it's in the teaching all along, but Reb has a way of using the paramitas that really explored on a little deeper level than you usually get in most Zen teaching, I think. And so, welcoming even our strangest attempts at self-clinging, our most deepest fears and rigid resistance that we come up against. He's teaching us how that is something that we can use as a transformation, that can be transformed. And when we apply it to our daily life, it can transform, seeing that it's not something substantial, not something separate. And that's part of the exploration, What are thoughts made of? What are these feelings of resistance actually made of? They're made of us, our being. And there's so much evidence that our being is everyone's being if we explore it. And and our suffering really helps us because it drives us to explore deeper.
I guess I'm the incurable pragmatist. Thich Nhat Hanh is not helpful to me. Maybe I would think very differently and have a different understanding of the teaching if I was at a Zen center and I had all day to sit and think about stuff. But I don't. I live in the real world. And one of the things that has really changed in my life that I'm wrestling with and adjusting to is just the almost constant state of having something to do and someplace to be all the time. And I feel that intrusion. I'm a private person, I'm an introvert, and I feel that intrusion into my life. And so I don't have the luxury of thinking about shared being. I don't even know what that is. And that would not be helpful to me because I have 140 teenage kids that I teach every day. I don't have the time or the luxury to think about any of that because I'm a real person and they're real people. And so, you have to pick a side. We either have to pretend that what's real isn't real and tell ourselves that's Buddhism and that's Zen, which I don't think it is, or we have to live in the real world. And I think that practice means something different when we are grounded in the real world and when we just operate under the assumption that the world is real and I'm real and you're not me and I'm not you and we are separate because that is our living reality. That is our living, breathing, moment by moment existence. I wish that I wish that there could be some infusion of supernatural energy into my life to carry me through the day. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. And that's okay, because that's how life is. So then practice is being in the real world as a real person, dealing just with all of that stuff. And so maybe that's just where I'm at in terms of my own understanding of the teaching, my own application of the teaching, and really just trying to flesh the teachings and the practice out within the context of a very busy life that is crowding out my ability to have time to think philosophically. And maybe that's good. Maybe, I feel that intrusion on my life, but that might be a good thing just in terms of some place where I need to grow and change and learn. But so I kind of have the opposite perspective of just some of these things, that the more philosophical things get, ironically, I'm just going to articulate this and then I'll be quiet. The more we talk about all of this sort of connection stuff, the more I disconnect from that, because that's not real to me. And that's okay. So I'm just on a different side of the coin
there. I really liked to take with me from this, this book, the part, I think is in 118, where he says that the perfection of wisdom is not really transcendent, that is about starting over and over again, which really resonates with me, as I feel like in my practice, so many times it's a constant starting over all the time, and hopefully it will not end that way. I'll continue to do so, and then he ties the same idea with the lotus flower and the fruit of the lotus flower falling into the water, because it's heavy and ripe, and the seeds and the stems giving life to and starting all over again, which ties the whole concept of starting over again. Everything starts over again and again, and to me that's just so beautiful, and it's just right before the whole, what he talks about, the proper response, which is also quite insightful and meaningful, and about not abiding and being able to be flexible in all directions, this bell, because it's not abiding into any particular ideas or anything, and so it's able to flex, and so thank you.
If we look at both what Steve had to say and what Shikan had to say, you've got to admit that we're all right in the midst of the catastrophe, for want of a better word. We all got to get up and we all got to go to work, and we all have this, that, and the other thing, except for people like me who are retired. But I'm just going to make this quote because it's cute. I've got nowhere to be and all day to get there. But I think one of the most important things for us in our practice is just the simple fact of not knowing, just being in the midst of everything and admitting to ourselves, we don't know. And all I can try to do is be present to what is here right now. And it's easy enough for me to say all those words, and I hope I don't sound too philosophical, but it's easy enough to say that. But like Steve is pointing out, it's pretty damn tough some days to deal with that. Now, on a more important topic, and this is all seriousness aside, now that we have Zoom, is this face-to-face transmission?
Not technically, no.
Pretty much it is. Yeah, and Gary, my last Zen teacher, Lou Nordstrom, who most of you probably know of anyway, said, the not knowing is not the cosmic shrug. It is facing the difficulties, and, and examining how does our thought structure determine how we meet it and how we deal with it and how we react to it. Explore that.
Yep.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
I agree.
Well, to Steve's point, which I can certainly relate to as a former teacher, one thing that the practice has helped me develop is the ability on most days not to resist what I have to deal with, whether it's a kid or a sick husband or whatever it is, but just reminding myself, okay, this is what I have to do today. This is what I have to do. So the practice helps us develop a broader well of acceptance with acceptance of all the random, crazy, unexpected things that come into our lives that we're not necessarily prepared for, but it helps us to kind of relax and say, okay, this is it right here today. How am I going to respond? And I believe our study of the Paramitas has really helped us deepen and broaden our resources in terms of appropriate and kind and helpful ways to be with whatever comes up each day.
Okay, we are nearing the end of our time, so Steve, looks like you are the final word for this evening.
I was actually just going to pass, but since too late now. So the waves and the water, intellectually I can get that. I'm like, okay, I get that. The water, they live and they die, and then they're water, and it's all good. What I don't get is who am I in that picture? Obviously, I'm supposed to be the wave, but how do I connect to the water? And so that's what I'm sitting with is where is the connection to the water in my life?
Well, you can start with open to the possibility, like I said, that no wave is wetter than any other wave, and the nature of water, our true nature can't be removed from us. No matter how much we try to resist it or try to seek it, it can't be removed. It is what we are. And just open to that possibility. I mean, everybody is right that it's, the words don't do it for you. You have to live it.
We will be continuing our practice this Saturday for our regular Saturday sit and service. We will also meet again next week. Next week, we start our new book by Maizumi Roshi, which is called Appreciate Your Life. So if you have not picked that up yet, you may want to do that. Of course, in the next couple of days. If you have Prime, you can get it in 2 days. And what you'll want to read for next week is the preface and the foreword. And so I think that will give you a little bit of a history of who Maizumi was and the impact of his impact on American Zen and bringing Japanese Zen to the West. And then the following week, we will begin the first chapter, the first formal chapter, which I believe is called Appreciate You. So let us know if you have any questions about that, and we will be moving forward together. How about we close with our